citizens, but we could have set up a perimeter in these future events. How we would go forward is have more security and have metal detectors. When there's events with hundreds of people gathering, it's not the ideal thing, but it's just the reality of the world that we live in. So the only way to get a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. So I'm all about making sure that we get more guns out there.
Roy Barron with us today, Voices of Global Freedom, and he joins us live here on the telephone, talking a little bit about. He's going to be chatting with us about his run for the White House, and what did you make of some of the presidential candidates and their take on what happened? You had everybody from Donald Trump to Bernie to Hillary coming out and talking about this situation. What do you make of what they said yesterday?
Well, I put this out there as a problem with fundamental Islam, and what I would do is take a really hard look. I'm actually stronger than Trump when it comes to dealing with these issues. For example, I just got off the phone with Robert Spencer not too long ago, director of Jihad Watch, when he was attacked, and thank God we had a 60-year-old street cop who put 2 bullets and killed the bad guys, the Islam terrorists. I would say the Phoenix Mosque that they came from, if I was president, I would completely destroy that mosque. It wouldn't exist the next day with the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's something infested like roaches growing in that Phoenix Mosque that caused them to drive all the way to Garland, Texas, and attempt to kill a lot of good people that were doing a freedom of speech rally. So I take it personally because I know the people who were in that building and had to go to a safe zone. It's horrible. My heart goes out to Pamela Geller, who put that together. I want to see more of these freedom of speech rallies, and I don't want that to be current.
We've got Roy Barron with us today, and Backpack from Voices of Global Freedom. Join us today here in our broadcast. We're going to get Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella back in here in just a few moments. We had a little bit of a snafu on the Skype, and we're going to let them chime back in here. We'll keep talking with Roy as we get ready to pull them back in here on our big program for a Monday, 12 minutes after the hour. Thanks for joining us. Red Nation Radio, of course, our good friends at ICRN and AMFM247.com. Now, Roy, you've seen all these different things. What do you make of the fact that now it's coming out that there's apparently cell phone video somewhere of 2 shooters? The media doesn't really want to talk about this. What do you make of the fact that there was now 2 shooters? At least there's some grainy video out there showing this.
Well, that just accounts to, I want to salute our brave FBI Director Comey. I do disagree with some of the other candidates. The FBI and Director Comey's in the
yeah.
We do have Obama who's refused.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
We are again. Hold on, Roy. We're having more Skype issues. I'm not a big fan of Skype. I can't stand Skype, but we're gonna reboot our Skype there. But go ahead, Roy. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, my friend.
Well, I just want to take this moment to salute all our FBI law enforcement. They're doing a wonderful job, and there's a lot of sides to this issue, but that they need to. I know that they're going after that grainy guy who was also shooting in that situation, but the answer is, as I said before, more guns. And when I become president, I'm running on a centrist platform, which means I'm going to take the best of the Republican, Democrat, and all the different parties have. Including Libertarian, a lot of the ideas, and bring it in as a centrist candidate, the first one to ever be elected in the United States. But I would meet with FBI Director Comey in the first day and say, what do you need to protect American citizens? Because I know every 4th day an attempt is stopped. So I would say, let me know what you need, and I would double that. And we got to have human intelligence, human. I think we have this drone stuff that we're using a lot, and we have incredible technology with satellites and all that. But I want to increase human intelligence. We need people looking at this data. So that's the answer that I want to encourage more of. The term in the industry is called HUMINT, HUMINT. So the solutions that we have is definitely. Director Comey was in meeting in Congress, Capitol Hill, and he was recently just begging for more help. And we as Americans need to back our FBI and law enforcement and say, hey, you guys did a fantastic job. Of course, it wasn't the ideal. As I said, my heart go out to all the families affected in Orlando. But we can bring an end to this, or doubling our human intelligence and doubling our FBI and our law enforcement. And really, I stand for Blue Lives Matter and what they do every single day. And there's so many people behind the scenes that are saving our lives every day and stopping. Like I said, every 4 days there's a new attempt to stop. So my heart goes out to all the families of our law enforcement and FBI who are doing a great job. And I want to bring that up. I'm probably the only person that you'll hear saying that. You're not hearing that on Fox News or CNN.
No,
or MSNBC.
no, you are not hearing that anywhere. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Great question. I think our country's become really polarized, and why I'm running as a centrist candidate is exactly that reason. The latest polls say that 70% of all Americans are centrist. They're somewhere in the, I believe they're in the middle. Or they're independent, which is in that centrist realm. And there's 15% on the left and 50% on the right. And so for the other 70% of Americans, which is the vast majority, it's the people on the left and the right who are messing it up for all of us. So they're all, these talking heads are all about ratings, and they're yelling at each other left and right. But I'm being a centrist and bringing hard solutions. But again, I just want to thank all our FBI, law enforcement, and our military and CIA for doing a wonderful job, because you've prevented so many from happening that we don't even hear about. And they're not, it's quiet professionals. They're not the ones bragging about this or that or ego. They're all about, and that's the kind of candidacy I run as a quiet professional myself, that, it's about the team. It's about the teams we bring in. It's not about some one person. I do have to make this statement. When Osama bin Laden was killed, there's a recent guy that's been on Fox. Not going to say who it is, but he's claiming that he was the guy who killed Osama bin Laden. It wasn't just him. He came in with a team. He had the helicopters. He had all these other special forces that were with him that resulted in the killing of Osama bin Laden. So we got to give credit to all these teams and the unknowns. There's stars on the wall at the CIA of people that they've done so much, and they died in service to protect our country. I recommend everybody in our audience go read Art of War, which you can get on Amazon.com, and it talks about why we need intelligence, why we need human intelligence gathering, people sifting through all this to stop a future Orlando shooting or what happened in Garland, Texas, and all the other San Bernardino, all the horrific attacks. I believe in doubling everything that FBI Director Comey does, and I salute him. He's a great guy. He's doing a great job, and he is one of our greatest here in our America. So God bless FBI Director Comey.
We've got, we're going to try this again. And we're going to see if we can get Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella on here. Skype has been giving us all sorts of fits today. There we are. I think I've got him. Skype has been giving me all sorts of fits. We've got our guest, Roy Backpack Barron, with us on the telephone. Dan, give us your thoughts on what happened in Orlando yesterday.
Oh, if you can imagine, I've been on the phone constantly all day doing interviews all over the country. I would say that my first reaction, Jim, was last night when I saw Geraldo Rivera on the scene live interviewing people who were in the club, various state and government officials. And I listened to what he said, and at one point during that that process he was going through, he said something that only thing I can say, Jim, is that it infuriated me because, and I'll tell you why it infuriated me. He said, when are we going to learn that one of these days it's not going to be an AR-15, but it's going to be a chemical or nuclear weapon that's going to come into this country and kill not 50 people or 100 or 3,000, but kill tens of thousands of people. At that moment, Jim, I was screaming at the television, will people please read my first book? in the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, a terrorist perspective, so you can begin the process of understanding why these people hate us so much. I told Don before the show that I was going to say something that I've been saying all day, and I've been getting some very strong reaction to what I said. So I'm going to repeat it for you, Jim.
Okay.
I believe that the blood of people who died in that nightclub is on the hands of the Supreme Court of the United States. And the reason I say that, Jim, is that we live in a different world today. We live in a world where, as we're doing it here, we're doing internet radio. We're talking over the internet in a three-way with me and you and your guest, and then add Don for number 4. We can't live in a vacuum. But the arrogance of the Supreme Court of the United States to decide for the world that America was now going to redefine what marriage had been from the beginning of time of Adam and Eve, one man and one woman, to say it could be 2 men or 2 women, was the height of arrogance, and it inflamed the radical Islamic people who are opposed to any form of deviant behavior, as they call it, as in relationships between men and between women. We have been told, if you look outside the United States and read some foreign media, we have seen example after example after example, where in various countries throughout the Middle East, homosexual men have been thrown from the tops of buildings, they've been beheaded, they've been shot, they've been burned alive, because homosexual behavior is not acceptable under Sharia and the Quran. And as a result, when the Supreme Court decided that they were going to be the arbiters who's going to change the history of man by saying that marriage is now redefined a different way, I believe that it enraged the Islamic nations to want to take action against the United States. They told us, Jim, 4 days ago, that in Ramadan, both Europe and America would be attacked for their beliefs. And so we make decisions without understanding what the consequences of those decisions will be. We have a president and a former Secretary of State who had a vision of what the Middle East was going to look like. They wanted regime change in Syria. They wanted regime change in Egypt. They wanted regime change in Iraq. They wanted regime change in Libya. They created, because of their arrogance and their inability to think beyond the end of their nose, turmoil that in the Middle East continues today, long after she has left office. And we have warring factions all over the Middle East with chaos reigning. We have Saudi Arabia and Iran very close to blows. We have Egypt desperately needing tourism and was destroyed by the Islamic attack on the aircraft. There's huge turmoil in the Middle East. We, as a country, are responsible for some significant portion of that turmoil, and we are going to pay the price. I wonder, Jim, how many gays and lesbians, homosexuals, and transgenders will have to be killed in the United States before they go underground. They're no longer public. That's my observation.
Don Mazzella, what do you make of what our good buddy Dan is saying?
Well, as I told him earlier, you can have your own opinion. I don't necessarily. I agree in principle with what he's saying. I don't know whether I think I'm getting feedback on my mic, but basically, what I'd like to say is, homosexuals and other what Islamic people feel are deviant people away from the Quran are clearly a target for them. Uh, ISIS and the Islamics also understand that there's a schism in this country between certain parts of the of our population and the gay community, and they're seeking to exploit it. Well, what we haven't seen, but I fully expect to see in the next couple of days, are further calls for ways of quote protecting unquote the gay community. I just don't believe that the gay leaders who have done such a great job of advancing their cause and making them a protected class won't use this. And that's what I really object to, and that's what I'm really worried about.
Now, Roy Backpack Baron with us today, also from Voices of Global Freedom. Roy's a best-selling author as well, and he's currently running for president of the United States. Tell us your thoughts on what Dan and Dawn have both said here on our program.
Well, I personally believe in traditional marriage. I've been married to a lady and divorced in my own life, but I also believe that I'm okay with the right to men and to homosexual marriage. I've got a nephew who is a homosexual, and I stand with him. I believe that he should be able to marry, and we'll have a much more productive and cohesive society when we have gay marriage. So I support that as a centrist candidate for president. I personally am a man who I'm single. I've never been a homosexual myself, but I would date a woman personally. I do believe there is a line, though, where I'm okay with people who are gay and want to get married, but I think that I don't believe in the proselytizing part where someone who's confused, 15 or 16, and they don't know whether they are homosexual or they're straight or whatever, and there is a line where it's too much proselytizing, where it goes overboard, where kids are confused. And they might not be homosexual, but they make that choice. So that's where I stand on that. So I'm okay with the Supreme Court decision of legalizing gay marriage. I stand with that.
Dan,
Sure.
Your thoughts on all this?
Well, I don't know whether this commercial plays out in your neck of the woods, Jim, but it's playing here in New York. And it's a commercial on a great big plateau, big flat land, and you see all these human beings with their head in the sand. And all of a sudden, they start pulling their heads out, and they're running towards a cliff. And the implication is they're going to run off of the cliff because they're all making the same decisions at the same time. They're not paying attention to what's around them.
Oh yeah, I've seen that a few times. Yes.
Okay, so I think that's where we may be at this moment in time. I understand and respect your guest to have his opinion about gay marriage. Doesn't mean that I necessarily have to agree with him. I also think that Don's right, that there is a protected class developing here. Right now, the protected class in America are Muslims, and perhaps as a result of this attack, there will be the gay community will become the protected class. But when you understand that in this nation, we're supposed to have freedom of speech, and if we disagree with what the gay community says they want to have done, we have the right to be able to say that without being criticized as being homophobic. And as a result, when we try and have an open discussion, in many cases, we are shouted down because we are treated as individuals who are insensitive, who don't care about the plight of the gay community, or women, or minorities. We are basically homophobe, sexist, racist, and we're prejudiced people. No, we're not. We're people that have an opinion that somebody else may not necessarily agree with. The idea that we're going to try and create a protected class in the gay community I go back to the question, Jim. If we understand that there are a number of people in the Islamic faith who are opposed to gay relations, how many gays have to be killed in the United States before it causes a fundamental shift in behavior and the openness of the gay community? Will they take their lives at risk?
Don, your thoughts?
Well, again, Dan brings up the interesting observation and puts a broad stroke to it. Even in this in so-called enlightened age, kids have still maintain a lower profile than one would expect. What I'm surprised about in New York, where I'm more familiar than in other places, they have pretty much kept to themselves and pretty much developed a society within a society. And it's very difficult to break that society. It'd be very difficult today, even last week, for a gunman to walk into a gay bar and do what happened in Orlando. I have to tell you an incident that happened to me. I was in New York and I had to go in to the bathroom, and I happened to duck into a bar, not realizing that it was one of the most famous gay bars in New York, and it was a very interesting experience for a heterosexual man to walk in there, because my every move was charted and watched by everybody in the room. So if someone came in who was a stranger, I think before he could whip out the weapon, I think there would be 3 or 4 people on top of him. I know that's not the case in Orlando. I mean, killing 50 people took a long time, and I don't know how more he wounded, and yet it took a long time for someone finally to wrestle him down. I don't think that would have happened in that bar in New York or in a lot of other places in New York and other parts of the country. It's a long answer, and I hope it's one that bears on this case.
We've got Dan Perkins with us today from thehill.com. We also have Don Mazzella from SB Digest, and we have Voices of Global Freedom, Roy Backpack Barron with us today, who is also running for President of the United States as well. And let's talk a little bit about presidential politics and some of the different things. Roy, for the benefit of Don and Dan, who weren't with us earlier when you were talking about your platform, go ahead and give us your thoughts on that, and then I'm going to let our two guys here ask you, two guys from Verona, ask you some questions.
Well, I'm running as the centrist candidate again. The 70% of Americans are centrist. 15% on the left and 15% on the right are messing it up for the other 70%. I believe that, again, that gay marriage should be in our society, because once we do it, it'll be a much more cohesive and accepting society. And as part of our freedoms, nobody has the right to tell other people that who can marry and who cannot marry. I want to point out a very important point that I've noticed with all the other politicians. I've watched all the debates, and I've been following it very closely, is that a lot of them are pushing it off on states' rights when they don't want to answer. I know when Ted Cruz and Donald Trump were asked the question about gay marriage, they said, oh, it's up to the states. But here I am as a candidate. I'm telling you that gay marriage is legal and will always be legal now. And when I'm in that chair in starting in 2017. So it's an important point that I'm answering the questions. I'm not pushing these on states, and I think that's a huge problem, because whoever does win as president will be appointing judges in all the land. So you got to know everything that they feel, every nook and cranny about this person has to get exposed. So I'm the only candidate who says, okay, I'm not pushing these huge issues on states' rights. We already know what their opinions are just from their backgrounds, but I'm not going to do that to the American people. I'm going to answer every question honestly and pragmatically.
Dan?
Yes, sir.
Don,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to let...
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opening. Let me suggest to you, Mr. Candidate, in all due respect, when did the central government in this country decide that it was in charge of marriage? When did the central government in this country decide that it was in charge of driver's licenses? When did the central government decide they were in charge of divorce? They haven't been. There is no precedent in this country that says that the federal government should decide on behalf of the states. Marriage, divorce, driver's licenses are all state issues. There is no precedent to allow the central government to decide to take power away from the states and the people to make the decision. When did the government decide they knew the best thing for education? For the longest time in the history of this nation, all the things that I just mentioned were states' rights issues, not federal government issues. So there is no precedent for the Supreme Court or for the central government to decide who should marry who. Because you get a state marriage license, you do not get a federal marriage license. It is the state who is responsible for certifying the marriage. And so all of a sudden, we have the federal government and the Supreme Court taking away the rights of the states that have been in the states since the founding of this country. I am one of those people who believes that the states do in fact have rights. And because they do have rights, they're in a situation where we've got the central government usurping the powers that the Constitution clearly delineates to the states. So the central government should have never gotten involved in gay marriage. The central government should not have ever gotten in the issue of what was the appropriate bathroom for a person who hasn't made up their mind what they want to be. Those are not appropriate federal decisions. The Constitution says that the role of the central government is to provide the protection of the American people. It doesn't give the central government all the power to decide what's going to happen in the states. And I think that that's what's happened in our country, is that we have acquiesced to the central government powers that were delegated to the Constitution to the states' governments. And so when somebody says, whether it's Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or whoever it is, that they believe that's a states' rights issue, that's not begging the question. That's dealing the reality of the Constitution. Education should be a local decision. It should not be a central government decision. Marriage and the process of marriage and the legality of the contract is a state decision, not a federal decision. And the driver's license is a state decision, not a federal decision. The longer we allow the central government to take control of the things that belong to the states, the more we become usurped under the power of the central government. That's not what the country was founded on. Don?
Amen. Dan, well, it's always difficult to follow you, but it's easy. I couldn't agree with you on that. But I'll ask the candidate, where do you stand? Is the federal government supreme in all these issues, or is our state government supreme?
Well, I'm a huge states' rights guy, and you can check out my platform on roybarron.com, but this particular issue of gay marriage should be a federal. And I'll give you another analogy, is federal government had to step in for segregation back in the 1950s. We would still have segregation in the South if we didn't have the federal government step in. But in many of the issues, I'm a states' rights advocate. This particular one I see as big as the segregation issue. So there is a time, there has to be an appropriate balance between the federal government. It's gotten way out of control, and there's a lot of programs like the BLM that I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of the IRS and some of the other bloated, wasteful federal. I'm in agreement that the central government is way too much, and it needs to, as much as possible, get back to the central government. I mean, as far as getting back to states government. So I talk a lot about that. But this particular issue, I would equate it to segregation. And in 2016 we still have segregation is the reality if the federal government had done nothing back in the 1950s.
Well, let me suggest. Excuse me, Don. Just one suggestion. Let me suggest, Mr. Candidate, that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would not have been enacted in this country if it were not for the Republicans, not the Democrats, the ones who were supposedly supporting black people. It was the Democrats who were opposed to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and it was the Republicans who worked with Lyndon Johnson to get it passed. So the idea that the Democratic Party represents the black people of this country is a bogus representation. But, you know, it's interesting that you compare the civil rights movement with the gay movement. I don't want to put you on the spot too terribly, but one of the things that we're discussing in our country today about the bathroom law is the number of people that are affected under the transgender rules. And people believe that the number that's being bandied about is 0.3% of the population. I ask you, Mr. Candidate, millions of people affected by the civil rights movement versus how many gay people there are in the country today. How many gay people in the country, if they have it back, might change their mind and get married as they continue their brothers and sisters being murdered, people who have an ideological difference to them on what's going on?
Well, I stand firm with the belief that we would still have segregation, and there are times when the federal government has to step in and do that, and we have to do that with gay marriage as well. So I have to stand with that platform. That's what I stand for. But so there's appropriate powers between the federal and state. And the bathroom issue, I definitely am against that because it's going to destroy our businesses. I want to make sure that, you know, a lot of the left-leaning liberals are talking about stuff that are destroying our hardworking small businesses. So it's a distinctive issue. One is incorporating a whole millions of gay Americans into the fabric of America. They're guaranteed to be members of our society, and they're going to be much more successful and very advantageous to our society with that marriage certificate. But the bathroom thing, I don't like that. I'm against that because it's going to just destroy our small businesses. So there is a fine line with a lot of these issues, and I'm definitely.
But let me ask you a question about the small businessman, and we have a guy who's an expert, Don Mazzella, who he'll jump in when I finish here. But if you think about it, we all saw the stories of the photographer who refused, the cake baker who refused, the party planner who refused, and as a result of this legislative process from the Supreme Court, now people can be sued if they don't want to serve cater a gay wedding or make a cake or take photographs or build dresses or whatever. What gives them the right to say to a small business person, you have to do this? Why is it that they now have a special right, that they have the ability to control the small businesses, caterers, photographers, limousine drivers, whatever, because they're now gay? They have the right to decide how the vast majority, and the number is roughly around 95% of the population of this country is not gay. They have the ability to control from a very small minority what's going on in the small business community around the world and in the United States. Why does that make sense to you?
I'm against regulation to our businesses. They're getting overwhelmed and destroyed left and right. But I believe if someone owns a cake company and they want to make cake, let them make however cakes they want. They have the right to refuse business. As soon as you walk in any business, we can reserve the right to refuse you if you're not wearing, if you're not wearing a shirt or you're not wearing shoes. So that's a very distinctive thing. Our businesses are getting slaughtered. So I'm all about helping our businesses survive. So in that particular issue, I'm all about helping our businesses survive. And they're under deep threats right now with this. Never would have imagined that Bernie Sanders as a socialist would run and be successful as he has been. But so I'm very pro-business.
But I don't understand how you can be pro-business when you believe in the gay rights, and yet the gay rights, when they got marriage and they got the Supreme Court in their favor, they now have control of this. You cannot refuse, because if you refuse, you get your ass sued off and you're out of business.
Well,
How does that help the small business, Don?
It doesn't. In New York, they have there's a list of that. The Americans with Disability Act enables people to, and there's a small group of lawyers and handicapped people that go around and, in effect, sue establishments because they don't have they have a step to end. You have to go up before you can enter, or they're in some violation. And there again, it's a minority, which are a minority of people, um, a minority of people who are in effect hurting small business. These various laws are really hurting small business when what we really should be doing is helping them. What are your thoughts on that? You're the candidate.
I agree. We should be doing everything we can to help businesses. They're just barely making it. And like I said, everybody, if you want to make a cake, you have the right to make it however you want, and you can refuse business. It's a whole different arena when you walk into someone's private.
But do you understand, sir, that you cannot refuse to serve a gay couple? You will be sued, and you probably will lose your business.
Well, I'm against frivolous lawsuits. I don't believe that someone should be sued over hot coffee spilled in their lap. That's ridiculous. So I'm going to do everything I can to get rid of these ridiculous lawsuits. It's destroying our country by these lawsuits. So we got to really take a hard look at that and make sure that businesses survive.
Well, everybody says we got to take a hard look at them. But pardon me, what do you do? How do you get Congress to repeal these laws? How do you get people to understand that they don't work? That they only help a small minority?
Well, that's a big part of running as a centrist candidate and looking at what is right for all 316 million Americans, and we have a lot of people, the thread of American fabric, and we got to look towards the American people making these decisions. It's not just these elitists in D.C. that are calling the shots. D.C. is owned by 360 million Americans, so I point that out.
So, if I might just ask another question, what are you? I'm assuming that you're aware that both the President of the United States, the two Democratic nominees for the candidates for the nomination of the Democratic Party, both have come out as a result of these massacre in Orlando. Believe that we need to eliminate the AK-47 or the equivalent assault rifle to be sold in the United States. Bernie Sanders said on Sunday that this attack was the failure of the Second Amendment. What do you think, sir?
Well, I am for guns. I believe in gun-heavy zones. The only way to kill a bad guy is with a good guy with a gun. So I want to increase CCWs. As one of my friends, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, said, we need a lot more citizens law-abiding. If some people in that Pulse nightclub had guns, CCWs, and were trained law-abiding citizens, there would have been a lot less casualties in the Orlando shooting. So I'm a huge gun guy in that area. I believe in gun-heavy zones. I'm against gun-free zones. That's the most dangerous place on the planet to be. And a lot of my friends that I've talked to are even afraid to go to a gun-free zone. They don't even want to go there. So I'm a huge gun advocate.
Because only the bad guys will have the gun. So you're basically, if I understand what you're saying, you are supporting or agreeing with, perhaps not supporting, but agreeing with Mr. Trump's position that if some of those, I'm sorry to say it this way, but if some of those gay people in that bar had guns, maybe a lot more of them would be alive. That's what Mr. Trump is saying. Are you agreeing with him?
I want to make sure that everybody has a right to get guns, and a bad guy will always get a gun. There's nothing we can do to prevent that. So I'm a huge gun advocate. As president, I would work with the NRA and the Gun Owners of America. I've interviewed Larry Pratt and Eric Pratt, great guys, and worked to get rid of these laws that preventing people from having guns. This is a huge issue, but I'm a huge, like I said, we need gun-heavy zones in all across America. And countless times that someone's been saved by a gun that you don't even hear about it. I don't hear about that on the liberal media.
Do you find it interesting, Mr. Candidate, that the President of the United States, who was standing at a podium in Asia criticizing the American police, was yesterday standing at a podium talking about the bravery of the American police who went in on the SWAT team, the first responders, to take this bad guy out? Is that two-faced?
Yeah, it is. I'm against Obama. Been a pro-Obama person. I never voted for him, but I believe that he is. You saw the speech. He didn't. He should have used the words Islam and terror together. He's refusing to do that. So it's a huge problem. And our law enforcement and FBI, when they create the reports, they're not allowed to use the word Islam and terror. And I have a website called terrorcamp.com, which identifies a lot of the Muslim Islam terror camps that are thriving across America. There's at least 35, supported by the Muslims of America, which is linked to a Pakistani terrorist. It's all about bringing those down. They need to come down day one when I become president.
Okay. Let me ask you another question, if I might. As a candidate, what do you think are the three most important issues that you need to address on your first day in office?
The number one issue is our country has gotten so divided. You know, everything is about all lives matter, all these different something matters. So bringing people together, I have a specific plan called a National Service Program, and it's a privatized voluntary program. It'll be similar to signing up to the military. It's a 3-year commitment, and it will pay money. Again, it's privatized, and it will be given out to mom-and-pop type contractors. It's a wonderful program. We've given a lot of thought of it, and it's going to bring America and patriotism together. So the number one issue is we have become the divided United States of America, or divided states of America. Ways to bring people together, and I'm running as a centrist candidate, and that's really what the top issue is we're facing right now. Number two is we need to make sure that people have guns. There's 3 major reasons why people need to own guns. One is to feed their family for hunting. The other one is to protect their home against invaders. And like I said before, there's been numerous home invasions where the bad guy was killed by a gun. And number 3 is to protect yourself against the government. So those are major issues that everybody's got to have their guns to protect their families and against the government.
Why do you say
let him finish? Don, let him finish his third point. What's your third point?
The third point is actually destroying terrorism at its roots. I do have a plan, like the Malta Agreement back in 1945, where all the countries that met in an island in Malta, it was Stalin, it was Winston Churchill, and FDR met, and they basically divided it up. My plan is to meet with China, Russia, and all the other world countries and say, we're going to bring back colonial powers to the Middle East. We're going to divide it up, and we're going to stamp out this ridiculous Muslim Sharia Quran stuff, and once and for all, and bring in military governors. They haven't been, I use the word cooked. The Middle East is still living in 7th century ways. There's an ad on their Craigslist in Saudi Arabia for a beheader. So they're so far behind, they're not ready. They've devolved into just chaos under the Obama and regimes. So my plan is to bring in, and you won't hear this anywhere else, work with all the other countries and have a similar Malta type agreement where France would get part Libya again, and they would control it with a military governor, similar to a State Department, and they would also have a military leader, and just really have a strong arm, and everybody divides it up, and everybody takes a real commitment to destroying this Islam terror once and for all.
So just so that I'm clear before I turn it over to Don, those are your three most important issues in your campaign. Is that correct?
Well, the fourth issue is I would like to see at some point, and I know as a president there are limited powers that a president can do. So I would like to see someone newly elected for all 50 states as a representative in Washington, D.C. We do have the National Governors Association, but I want to see the states risen up a whole lot more than they are today. So I would want to have someone who's another person who's elected. Right now we have governors and lieutenant generals that are elected in each state. Have them actually have a seat in Congress and looking at everything as well. So I'm a huge states' rights guy in that area.
Okay,
So
Don?
that is the federal government has gotten out of control. It's way too much.
Well, we all agree with that. It's interesting. You said 2 points that I wanted to talk about. One of them is you seem to think that we should be against the government, which seems to be the world today. You're either for government or against it. But I guess I grew up in a time when we just thought of it as the government as working for us. I always quote Harry Truman. I did it yesterday on the air. When he said he always thought the president was the servant of the people, and when he left the White House, he thought he got promoted. I've always thought that was the way we should look at it. But my other point is, you don't mention the economy. And to me, that is the most important issue that's facing this country right now, and you're not addressing it. How do you address the economy?
Well, as I said before, this national service program is privatized and voluntary. Will bring in a lot of jobs with me that people love to do. It'll help rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. It'll create English teachers. The plan is of using Briggs-Myers aptitude tests, those like that, and get people who are from South Chicago in the rough areas, and maybe they're about to enter a gang and they might be facing some kind of jail time, and they've never really done a crime before. So move them to Florida and do an aptitude test on them. See, are they want to teach English, which English should be our national language. Make that certain. Or maybe they want to join the military, or what is it that they really want to do? And the key to this program is moving someone from a completely different state, and it cuts all their ties to, and they get to see how beautiful and humongous, what a wonderful country this is. But it's bringing back jobs and also bringing back what we can to help rebuild America and bring patriotism. That people from all backgrounds will be working together side by side, as we see in our military. So it's going to be a similar plan to that, but it won't be a draft. It'll be a voluntary privatized system called the National Service Program.
Jim?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, Dan.
As I said, I've been inundated with calls today. I've got to leave at 6 for another interview. But let me ask you. You're talking about something similar to the old CCC with the Depression. Those are government jobs. We need the private sector in this country to spend some of the money they have to try and stimulate this economy. But a central government and a central banker has failed miserably in trying to stimulate not only the American economy, but the economies around the world by believing that low interest rates will in fact create jobs. Low interest rates don't create jobs if there's no opportunity for a company to grow. The idea of public service, I agree with that, but it's all unskilled labor. We need to find a way to put those people who lost their jobs, the 94.7 million, many of which were skilled labor, have lost their jobs. Over a third of the blue-collar workers in this country today are unemployed and nearly bankrupt. So we've got an awful lot of people with a lot of talent that we need to put back to work. And your core is a good idea for some people, but we need to find good-paying jobs for the rest of the people. Done?
Well, I was going to ask our candidate another question, if I may, which is, uh, who would you nominate for the Supreme Court? What type of an individual would you nominate for the Supreme Court? That's another issue people have seemed to have forgotten about.
Well, I would nominate a constitutionalist. Justice Scalia is someone who I'm very proud and honored. I never got the chance to speak to him, but I really like where he stands. I see where we are at this tipping point. It's such an unusual time in our American history to have 4 and 4, and I see how they vote. But I would vote the way whoever represents the Constitution.
That's a big word. Represent the Constitution. What do you mean by that?
Well, it would be a person, Justice Scalia stood and voted the way for keeping cohesive our country together and supporting the difference between states' rights and federal rights. So we really, since 1865, the war was about slavery, but it was also took a huge hit on states' rights. So I want to bring back as much to states as possible, and it's going to require me meeting with all 50 governors, a lot of meetings. Like 10 days out of every month. It's going to be exhaustive meetings to see what needs to be moved back and what should be. But like I said before, the BLM needs to be gone as soon as possible. Get rid of the Secretary of Education and move it back to states. I work with some of the luminaries I interviewed on Voices of Global Freedom, offer them cabinet positions, and then take down any roadblocks they might have. So we talked a lot about the issues. I'm against Common Core. It's terrible. I want to bring back vocational schools and training, and learn more at Voices of Global Freedom and roybarron.com.
Well, that's a really, to me, a great agenda. I always worry about that. We got 50 states with 50 different problems. I can't imagine Chris Christie getting in the same room with Andrew Cuomo, let alone people from the western states. You have a tall order in front of you. How do you intend to get on the 50 ballots?
Well, there's still a chance that I might get on as an independent. I have till August 22nd to register as an independent centrist candidate in the state of Texas, which is where I've been, although I've been traveling the country 5 years, and I wrote the book Looking Glass Shattered, which is on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. But I would definitely, it would be a lot of exhaustive meetings. I'm prepared for it. I don't play golf. I don't do sports. I love America. I love my country. I was born here. I have a birth certificate to prove it. And so I'd be willing to work. It's all about collaboration and working together. There's a really great website I just met the leaders of. It's called collaboratenation.com. I'm supporting the leaders of a great guy I just interviewed recently on my own radio show. I'm doing a radio show called aslugline.com, and a new thing that's more centrist type of show. But I would have to be able to convince like a Chris Christie out of New Jersey, that out of New Mexico or other state, that we got to make this decision, and especially our crumbling federal states, interstates that Eisenhower brought to life. There has to be a way to collaborate between the states, because I do see that a New Jersey governor is going to be mostly interested in New Jersey, and a New Mexico governor is going to want New Mexico stuff. So it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm ready for it. I'm putting myself out there.
Well, you're to be admired for that alone.
Well,
to do something like that, you have to. You should be admired, because you suffer an awful lot of rejection before you get affirmation. So, good luck to you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a whole lot to me, and God bless you. God bless America.
Well, as
we all want that.
As we wrap up here, Don, but before we let you go, I know that we're going to be talking, I believe tomorrow, you and Dan are going to be talking with IQ Al Rizzoli about this shooter situation and some of the other things. But as we go, how do we find you online? And then we'll let Roy, wrap it up here for us.
DonMazzella.com, and Twitter is hashtag 2SB Digest. My book, An American Family Sampler, is really starting to take off thanks to you and my efforts here. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's a good time, and Dan had to bolt out of here, but check him out online, danperkins.guru. And Roy, before we let you go, how do we find you online, sir?
Sir, you can find me on Twitter with My Human Compass, which has over 66,000 people. My book is Looking Glass Shattered. It's on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. My website is roybarron.com. Learn more about the policies that I'm proposing, and also I'm actually exclusively here on the Jiggy Jaguar show. I'm doing a hike for America with 316 million Americans. I'm starting in Hot Springs, North Carolina, and I'm going to go up to West Harper's Ferry, where there was a famous the abolitionist John Brown, and I'm going to make it up there. And I'm calling on all Americans. You're welcome to join me. I'll have my backpack on. And you can call me at 442-224-4094 or give me an email, globalfreedomnet@gmail.com. You're welcome to come along. But I'm going to start towards the end of June, and I'm going to meet up with a bunch of people. One of the things I would do as president, I would pardon all the people at the Bundy. As I'm getting rid of the BLM, I would pardon the Hammonds, the Bundy family. I would immediately pardon them. They've suffered, and they've done so much to try to help our country the best they can. So join me on this hike. I'm calling it a backpack hike for America, and I'm looking to see whether it'll be July 4th or July 26th. I'm going to meet with a whole bunch of other people to call it a Million People March to bring back Washington, D.C. to the 316 million Americans. So that's my goal. So feel free to call me, reach out to me, and let's see, make something happen and shake up D.C.
Well, Don, I appreciate you being with us today. Roy, appreciate you as well. And looking forward to everything as we move forward. And Don, we will talk to you tomorrow. And Roy, we will talk to you soon. Have yourself a wonderful day, my friend.
You too.
Thank you, Jiggy. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you.